Anna,
Hey Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. This
Yeah,
is really exciting.
yeah, nice to speak to you. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad actually. Like it's a bit blustery down in Bristol.
Yeah, I know it was really nice a few days ago, and now it's just gross, right?
Actually, I prefer the grossness to be honest with you, because I actually find sometimes I struggle to deal with the heat.
Hmm.
So it was getting to a point where like last weekend where it was just kind of too hot.
Yeah,
Find yourself that you're unable to do things.
yeah, it's very hard to get any. I haven't based it in the heat. Don't get any music written or anything else I need to do. So actually, you're right. This is much more conducive.
Because I actually found that for me, that sometimes it also brings out like also things like bodily anxiety a lot more because I'm like obviously kind of quite a big person sort of thing, and then um I find it kind of weirdly kind of like frustrating sometimes.
Mm. Definitely seems to sort of heighten stuff a bit, doesn't it? It's sort of, and also I guess I don't know if you found this, but just when this whole lockdown began, it felt like it was still winter, and now it's sort of summer, and you think, what's happening to the year? It's just
I guess
going by.
we're so used to programmed into having like festivals and to like having live shows and then having like I guess our usual kind of like sort of things that we program our time of years by having those kind of events.
Absolutely, it's strange. Not it's losing all the structure, isn't it? It's very strange.
And that's the thing is that, that's what it's taken a lot of people actually a long time to do is to readjust.
Mm,
And so I found that I think that's the biggest problem which I've come to face with actually is like lack of structure.
mm, mm.
Like I enjoy sometimes having some of the time. It's just like you realise that you look forward to the certain things that you had planned, and that you look forward to them because of like I've been doing like I've been doing a group called Art in Motion, who are like a special needs arts group sort of thing. And
Mm.
that's been really, I mean, they've been really great because of like they usually get me out in the flat on the Wednesday sort of thing and get me
Yeah,
being around people. And when you think of those kind of structures, it's like
yeah.
now we really lack them because we're all like locked up, cooped up in our own little homes or
Mm.
wherever we are, sort of thing. But I tell you one thing which has helped is has actually been having live streamed gigs.
Really? Is that been? Have you watched a lot of them?
Yeah, I found, but I've also found that they've sometimes like kind of accidentally soundtracked my walks. So
Right.
sometimes like sound like kind of playing them on my phone
Mhm.
and without any headphones, and like I've been trying to notice if nature has taken is reacting to the sound as well.
What you mean that it's sort of like the soundtrack is affecting where you walk?
Yeah,
Wow, that sounds great.
it's like so if like so I've been like because I'm really lucky in Bristol because I've got several really big parks
Mm.
so I can go on like kind of regular loop. But I've always kind of like if I'm live streaming the show, I'll always try and stop and see if the birds are reacting to what's coming out my phone, or if they're reacting to, or maybe I'm just making things up. Something.
No, but I think that's a nice thing, and also you see, you're experiencing the music in a place that's totally different to where you'd normally experience it in the, in with other people, which obviously it has loads of really negative things, but interesting to be able to see how even if nature isn't how your interpretation of the music in that new context changes is nice.
Also, I think it's a really interesting way of like getting people to think about how much music we're actually surrounded by.
Mm.
Because I know that, I mean, like, 'cause quite often, like, we don't always think of like birds singing as music. We don't always think of like, all the sounds that we kind of walk past. How they inadvertently soundtrack our lives, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if you know this about me, but I don't listen to any music.
Yeah,
Um, it's a sort of thing that helps, it doesn't help me when I'm trying to write. So I'm, even normally, I've not really had any music on at all or any gigs, but I have listened to a lot of audiobooks. So that really helps me with stories. So it helps me get to sleep and helps me with, feeling anxious. And So I've kind of just got, and so when I'm walking, I like to have a story, and sometimes you're right, the sort of landscape really ties in with the narrative of the story, and that's a nice thing to be able to stop and kind of reflect that kind of time as well.
I very much get that for myself, sort of thing. So quite often used to like, I will always listen, like sleep with the radio on, or I always have like kind of. I used to like when I was really young. I used to have like story tapes,
Mm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
so I'd always have to have someone like kind of reading to me, sort of thing.
It's very comforting, isn't it? I really like it, and I find reading a book, trying to read a book is I don't feel a bit sad about it, but I find that very difficult. I find the concentration and the focus, but when someone's talking to me or telling me a story, it's a different thing. I can listen, and do other stuff, wash up or clean or garden or go for a walk, and
I
yeah.
I think it's partly because of like we're hearing someone else's voice, and it allows us to visualize actually what the characters might look like.
Good point. Yeah, I think that's it. I think you've got it exactly right there.
But like almost having like a cinematic way of thinking.
Mm,
So
mhm.
so quite often like when I'd be listening to like story tapes, I would fully imagine like how would this look on screen? How would this look? How would my vision of this thing look?
And
Then
isn't it weird when a story that you know well or have read or listened to then becomes a film and the people don't look at all how you thought, and it's quite feels quite odd, doesn't it, when you sort of that disconnection.
but then it's also reminds you that things are open to like reinterpretation. And I think that and I think there's also like I think there's a certain amount which could be said within music about like kind of interpretation and reinterpretation. I think
Mm,
like I mean, especially when I'm looking at like stuff like soundtracks, sort of thing.
hmm.
It's quite often like a lot of films they depend on like the sound to tell people what to feel, like how emotionally do you feel invested in the characters.
Mm,
So
hmm.
really,
Yeah, it's interesting. When I've when you're writing music for a narrative. So I've done a little bit of film, but I've also in the past written an opera and stuff.
yeah,
So storytelling. And what's a nice thing to think about is whether you want the music to reinforce what's happening, but sometimes you can underpin it. Sometimes what's happening can look really happy, but you can add unease or
yeah.
anxiety into that. And that's a really, it's really nice to be able to feel that you have that kind of, you can, yeah, either amplify what's the existing narrative or you can completely subvert it. And that's, it's great to be able to
I mean,
think about that sort of narrative strand as well.
which is what I found, which is why I really loved the soundtrack for like eighth grade.
Mm.
Actually, that it really did utilize like the way that you can mix like kind of euphoria with anxiety.
Mm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a bit in the film where they have like the pool party, and you do really feel like the actual kind of sense of dread of the like the teenage girl having to step outside and like kind of being around all these people, sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's great.
And that's the thing is that I've always felt that I guess it's like a reminder that the emotions can be so closely linked together.
Mm.
And I think that I mean I was just like trying to sum this up to people. It's like the first time. I mean, the first time I would have come across actually you would have been at End of the Road Festival.
Right.
I think 2015. I think that was.
Probably 16 because we didn't tour. Varmints only came out in 2016, so I don't think we did any touring before that year.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, I remember like I think it was like Laura Snapes who pretty much dragged me to come and to like kind of almost twisted my arm to come and see you play.
Right.
And yeah, it was pretty amazing. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
I think one of the things which I love is that I think you're very much like someone who likes to try and find new voices for different instruments.
Mm.
So like a very much so it's like the way that he makes like the kind of like the organy synth with like the tuba and like how you can arrange things.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And like yeah, I mean especially when you're playing like stuff like Nautilus, it felt like as if I was being stuck on like a kind of like I feel like I was like as if I was being propelled forward.
Mm. I think that momentum, that sense of that pacing of it's the thing that when I'm composing, I spend the most time on is controlling the development of the material so that it's not just like improv. I don't just sit down and improvise at the beginning. I really plan out how material is going to either obsessively repeat or develop so that you can. And I try and imagine that from a listener's point of view or on an audience's point of view, to imagine in real time what it will feel like if an idea accelerates or grows. And so I'm trying to imagine that visceral feeling, that physical feeling of what of what material will have. So that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it definitely felt like it definitely works because it definitely works. Well, it definitely worked on me anyway. Because I was also wondering, like, how do you, when it comes to like kind of composing your work, do you have to have like a very set way that you work?
I have one sort of overall way of writing that I use across all the writing that I do. So whether that's an orchestra piece or a soundtrack. So I'm definitely not someone who thinks about genre at all. I'm not thinking this is a pop song, this is a instrument, this is a techno track or anything. I'm just thinking about the musical material and how to control that in a way that gives each piece a very distinct character. I want each of the tracks to feel in their own world and with their own identity, even though there's instrumentation elements that cut across with the instruments I like. So the thing that I do with all the tracks I do is I draw this very graphic sketch on a bit of paper, not notated initially, to like I was saying earlier, to plan out the sort of pacing of the ideas. So there's a lot of these kind of very angular shapes which help me kind of control the sort of context of a musical idea. So I do that first, and then I go to classical notation software. It took me ages to figure out that it doesn't make sense for me to go straight to a synth or to like Logic or Ableton. If I write music like that, it doesn't have the same control and it's not really playing to my strengths. So I actually write all of this music on a program called Sibelius, which is designed for notation. So for classical notation, it's not really designed for playback or anything like that. So I write everything's fully notated in classical software, and then I export the information out of there and into Ableton eventually to sort of make it electronic, I guess. But initially, I would say all the bulk of the work goes into the planning, the sketches, and then the actual composing, like nuts and bolts, which happens in notated form, and that happens for all the music that I do.
So it's like if you can like visualize it first, and then you can like, then you think of like as like the piece of music that you're kind of creating is like kind of like telling the narrative.
Exactly like that. That's a sort of analogy I always use to people. I sort of say, if you're telling a story to your friends and there's a punchline or a surprising thing that happens, we all set those elements up. We set it up to be a surprise or to be a big payoff. And that's how I think of music. I think of what is the payoff of this track. And if I want something to feel, for example, very strong and impactful, then I might put something very light before it so that the strong thing feels even stronger. So it's kind of like planning bookmarks, I guess, through a bit of music, so that when you have arrival points, they're even more impactful because you've had something that is either very different before it or something that feels very satisfying.
Yeah. I very much feel that, so it's like so when the punch does come in, then it's even more powerful and it has kind of quite a full effect.
Exactly that. You want to try it, and it's quite fun to compose that way, because you're thinking, I've got this great idea for a bass line but how can I make it feel even bigger than I might? What's the way I can make it as big as possible? So it's kind of doing justice. I think that's it, doing musical justice to your ideas.
Yeah, I think it's also like being not afraid to try things out, and also if things don't work, like completely strip them back down.
Definitely. I think I think when I was younger, some of the music I wrote, orchestral music I wrote when I was younger, I didn't have the confidence in singular ideas, and there was a lot of I used to try and think I was making an idea stronger by adding more things to it, And now I think I try, well, my aim is to try and strip back until there's a really clear identity. And
Mm.
yeah, if it's not working, you know, if I find myself getting into that bad habit of thinking, oh, I'm not sure about that, so I'll put something else on top of it, I now try and deliberately get back down to the initial idea and check if it's any good and working it from there.
Yeah, I mean, also, do you find that yourself? Are you like kind of inspired by like the outside environment or like the environment that you can that surrounds you?
Um, Not enormously. I find it very important for sort of my mental health
Yeah,
to you know be outside and see people and do the things that help me feel confident, because that personal confidence really drives a lot of the music. And if I'm not feeling in a good place mentally, then actually I can't get the confidence I need to write confident music. So my environment is something I need to sort of create the right conditions. But in terms of stimulus or starting points for the music, I almost try get in a bit of a bunker. I don't listen to any music
yeah,
and I don't look at any art or poetry. I'm trying to just write music on my own terms and
mm,
to my own rules, or to my own little things that interest me. So I might be thinking, oh, I want to write a track that has a chorus that's all yes,
yeah,
or want to write a track that has a shape that it's like a rocket that just keeps building and building. So I'll have a little mini brief, a little
mm,
mini, agenda for myself, but it's not normally uh, to do with any other stimulus.
yeah. I mean, there's this one. There's like, I guess I was just wondering that just because of like your music does touch on a lot of raw nerves of like kind of emotion and like I think that's probably what makes it work is the fact that it does touch people, you know,
Mm.
like that, and that otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you. That
Yeah, I think that's important to sort of, I making this music was I had a pretty well established classical career that was going, had its own thing, and I made this step to step out of that and do this, start writing back, this electronic music. Um, and it's something I care about so much,
mm,
and it's so much work and very little money, and so it has to be a real labor of love, and you have to believe in it. And me and my band, I'm lucky to have worked with them now for many years, and that commitment from those people, I think, really inspires you, because you feel nobody's asking for it and nobody's paying. It's very different to a commission where someone might say, here's a big budget to write a film or an orchestra piece.
yeah,
Writing these, and obviously so many bands are in this position, but yeah, it has to, I want it to touch people, and because it moves me. And
mm,
I think when I've seen reviews of my stuff that say, oh, it's all head, no heart, it's all academic, I
uh,
feel really upset, because I want it to be, sure, there might be some complicated time signatures happening, but it's all designed to have a physical
mm.
human connection.
That's the reason why I find that a lot of the music which I like it because it makes me feel something, you know, and it's like in that the way which I explain to people. So it's like, so that the certain bands which I kind of gravitate to because they'll either make me. It doesn't always have to be a good feeling, but it's like you know that there's going to be like a reason why you're going to end up feeling whatever emotion the artist wants to make you feel. I very much feel that whenever you're at a show, you're put in the hand in their hands, sort of thing, and that this may actually help. You know, kind of coming to live shows. It's also helped me deal with like vulnerabilities and like kind of various other issues, sort of thing. And I think that music has the ability to do that, to communicate in a way which, or like create like an open dialogue, which maybe we sometimes are too scared to do.
Mm. Hmm. And I
But,
think the thing of when you come to a show, you go on a journey with a
mm,
band, don't you, in that time? I mean, some bands not. Some bands want to keep a distance, and
yeah,
that can be cool, or that can feel a bit detached. But the gigs or the music or the gigs that stick in my mind are the ones where I've been somewhere and I've sensed that desire to communicate, and
mm,
I've come with the artist on the show. And when we're doing gigs and I see people, I love it when I feel people are coming, especially when you're doing a show that has quiet instrumental stuff and
Yeah.
huge instrumental stuff and singing, and there's in our gigs, there's lots of variety. And so you need the audience to come with you. If they go, oh, and get their phone, and they're just, if they're texting or, chatting, then that's also obviously fair enough and completely human. But the gigs that I love are the ones where you sense that people are coming with you on a journey, and that communication feels amazing.
I very much felt that with the Trinity gig that you played earlier this year. It very much felt like as if we were being taken on a journey, sort of thing. And I mean, like, so also the other times I've seen you play, I very much felt that it's very much that sort of thing where you do need to pay like kind of like attention to the intricate details, sort of thing.
Mm. I
Uh,
think if you can come, when we're planning the gigs, we plan in the same way that I do a kind of map of a track or an album. I also do the same for a show. So I
mm,
like to plan out the kind of pacing of the show to make sure that there's tension and release and
mm.
focus and euphoria, and then light, fun but seriousness. That kind of balance is something.
Oh, you need to have fun. Come on,
Yeah,
let's face it. If it wasn't fun for you, then you'd not do it, would you?
I think so. I mean, I know for me that sense of enjoying it and the joy. I mean, it's a huge honor to be able to do it at all, to be honest. And nothing like this year makes us all appreciate how much of an honor that is, that people come to gigs. And obviously I'm still relatively very small scale in terms of audience reach and popularity and all that stuff, but it's a huge honor, and I love playing with my band. It's a privilege, the whole thing. And I think to kind of not reflect that in your performance, to be aloof, or
Mm.
is might be the right thing for some music, but it doesn't feel I'm just
But
happy
I
to do
find,
it.
I mean, sorry for over talking you. Yeah, because I quite often find that quite often people's music will reflect their personalities.
Mm,
And I think that sometimes people may be a bit aloof because they're probably too shy.
mm.
So like, which I can fully relate to. Because like, the several times when I've tried to go on stage, it is absolutely terrifying. And I know that sometimes you kind of to split, like kind of create an alter ego in some ways.
Mm.
And
So
it's
you think some performers who, maybe some of that distance is a protective mechanism.
yeah,
Mm, mm-hmm.
because I'm like, I think secretly we do fear being judged.
Yeah.
I think that, which I think isn't like, it's a natural thing, but then it's also like, is if and how do you deal with, I guess like the euphoria if you've done like a really good show? Do you like have to like have a process of like kind of winding yourself down?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because, I'm sure all artists feel this, but, for myself, I feel like I give a lot in a gig. It's a lot of energy. And, if you feel like it didn't, normally there's always someone, even when we've done tiny gigs and basically nobody's turned up, there's always been one or two people who are having the time of their life.
Yeah.
And so you can all, in those moments you do the gig for them.
Mm.
And even if the rest of the people aren't into it or on their phones or trying to have a drink, aren't there, if there's one person who is beaming and getting their head down or that's enough for me. But it does feel that after a show you can feel normally initially quite euphoric, quite kind of high, because you've pumped yourself up with so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, then afterwards, to be honest, with the small scale that we're at, the reality that we then have to pack up our
Yeah.
stuff and sell the merch and pack up and drive to a
Mm.
shitty hotel is quite that's quite a depressing. Well, it's quite it's a sort of grim reality that it's not a luxurious tour bus filled with champagne.
Exactly.
You
What quite often the kind of supposed rock star image is painted up, though, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And I think, as someone who wasn't in that world 10 years ago so much, I had this idea, because classical music has a lot more funding.
Yeah.
And so I think I had this idea that, you know, every band had a roadie and that every band had, you
Yeah.
know, tons of help. And actually now that I see that we are the ones who drive ourselves around and set our stuff up, and that reality again, you know, is exhausting, but it also is once again to me a real sign of the commitment and love, which is a really positive thing that we all want to, you know, that even with all this sort of slog of it, it's still worth it.
I think that it's also the way which I say it's also that there's with some of the stuff that you do, especially with like when you're pushing the boundaries of different genres, is that you're very much like and almost acting as like a step in a weird way like a stepping stone. So you could be introducing like kind of new artists to new ideals.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a thing about well, you know, when if you're yeah, I always find that for us people sometimes look at the instruments
Mm,
that are in my band, and they might think, oh, it's not going to be for me because there's a cello in it or a
yeah.
clarinet, and they might think, or they might, you know, I've had lots of people who assume that for some reason I write folk music just because I don't know why. I think it's just
Or
because
maybe just they read the name and that sometimes
yeah,
when you read someone's name, you do have preconceptions. And so I did, admittedly, when I saw you end of the road, I did have a bit of a preconception. But then when you started playing, I was like, okay, this is something completely else. I was like,
yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or because it's, you know, or because of the classical. Maybe you might know that, but yeah, I think there's an assumption maybe that the music might be quiet or
yeah,
soft, and you know, there's and that can be fun to sort of subvert that, you know, and be you know, has doing strong music. So I think you know, the only problem that we have is a practical problem that
mm,
quite often people want to program the music. Maybe if they haven't heard it or seen us play, they want to program us either in a church with a big boomy acoustic that doesn't work for the music. We need it to be somewhere where you can hear all the layers, otherwise it just gets quite mushy.
this is like
Um,
somewhere like the Trinity, which is like especially, which is, even though it's a church building, it's actually been turned into a full-time venue.
yeah, it was a great venue. We loved that gig.
Oh man,
Yeah,
it's a beautiful venue. That's definitely in my top 4 or 5 venues in Bristol,
is it great?
hands down. I mean, like, because I've seen some really amazing shows in there, and also that you can tell that the artists really like it in there as well.
Mm,
Because think about it, it's like you look at the outside, it's a big, massive, booming church space. It's also like a kind of a community, like a community centre as well.
mm-hmm,
All the communal gardens outside,
mm,
like kind of upstairs, there's all the artist studios and like kind of like they've got like a mini theatre upstairs
mm,
and
mm-hmm.
like rehearsal spaces because they do like community projects,
Yeah.
which is really good. But
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely one of those places where I can like I'd say it's probably up there with like the Louisiana and like the Exchange and Factflow and stuff like that for me.
Okay.
I mean, like it's definitely like when or like St George's Hall even.
Mm,
Sometimes I don't go to St George's all that much, but when I do, it's like it kind of does feel a little bit classist, and I think
right.
maybe like sometimes with maybe that's sometimes like an image with classical music sometimes
Mm-hmm.
as if as if in like some people can appear a bit classist. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you get that at all.
Mm. So do you mean that there's a few venues that you don't feel very or don't seem as comfort as welcoming, maybe?
Yeah, a little bit. I think
Mm, mm,
occasionally, but the very I mean like places like the Exchange have very much embedded themselves in a very supportive community and like kind of and like the Trinity the same and the
mm,
Louisiana sort of thing. But I think maybe it's just like a preconception within certain genres of music, maybe.
mm,
So like maybe like cause I tend to find that as I've grown up, what I listen to has changed, or how I listen to things has changed.
mm,
I thought like 10, 12 years ago that I'd end up kind of going to classical shows, really, because I never really. I guess it's partly because like never knowing, partly knowing what's out there, and then also I think it's partly been through like the introduction of labels like erased tapes have helped, you know,
mm,
down that barrier to a certain extent.
mm.
I don't know if you ever feel anything like that with.
Yeah, I mean, almost, I guess, the other way that I, grew up with classical music so much, and I mean, I don't know a lot of the venues that you've mentioned. I haven't been to them, but I absolutely know that feeling of the difference between the formality of a classical venue and the quiet and the, when do I clap and
Yeah,
sitting, and the can I, you can't bring your drink in, or that sort of stuff is can feel quite counterproductive to trying to encourage more people in, and they can be quite frustrating. um, and but then on the other hand, sometimes I love the focus, people
yeah,
sit and listen in a way, people aren't talking during the music, and people aren't on their phones, and there's a lovely concentration. So it's hard to get that balance right, I think, between what I like is focused listening in a pop venue. It's a kind of combination that I like the best, like a seated venue. When we've played seated gigs, it's
mm,
quite difficult. People engage in a different way. The audience feel further away, and it can really work for some kinds of music. I don't think it works so well for mine, but if you're playing quieter music, I think a seated gig can be lovely. Um, but yeah, I think it's good. I think it's healthy that a lot of venues are trying to be more adventurous with their programming, and that you have big traditionally classical venues bringing in electronic musicians and bands and stuff. I think people are trying to be more creative. Who knows what will happen in the future now?
that's very true. And there's still that level of uncertainty. But
Absolutely.
I've also found that I think that in a way of engaging with people, like it also encourages people who never thought they could play a musical instrument
Mm.
into like kind of creating.
Hmm.
Because like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen was it was a disabled orchestra playing in Bristol, and they were doing
Parallax.
yeah.
Yeah. The
I think
Parallax.
I think it was like it was I can't remember who it was. It was one of the like kind of disability kind of colleges.
Mm.
I can't remember what it was called, but it was they were doing like a version of like Vivaldi's Four Seasons,
Hmm.
where they were playing it on like it was with a company called Soundbeam.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's with those guys.
Hmm.
So they inadvertently reinterpreted it into like almost like kind of like from like a serene atmospheric piece into like a kind of crowd rock banger by accident.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
but the part of what made it really special was just seeing the joy of people's faces. To be able to actually access something which they couldn't physically access before.
Mm. Hmm.
So whether it's like kind of like they had like, but some people were playing notes by literally the blinking of their eyelids, or like some people were playing by like those people who'd have like literally rings on their hands with lasers, and they'd be like kind of like creating like kind of I guess motifs or riffs by literally moving their movements of their hands.
Hmm.
I just remember being stood there going, "Wow, this is something really special."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's really lovely when projects are trying to be inclusive in that way and find ways to allow everybody to feel that if they want to engage with music, that you can, that you don't have to have certain trait. I've written quite a lot of body percussion pieces. I'm not sure if you've seen any of those.
No, I'm not sure I have, but I'm definitely aware of body percussion. I'm
Yeah, I've written a piece called Hands Free. That you have a look if you're got a moment. It's on my website, and it's for an orchestra to do, but with no instruments. So it's all body percussion and beatboxing and choreography. And what I like about that piece is that anybody could do it. There's no notation, and there's no musical instruments, and you don't read music to do it. You are
mm,
taught it, and so it's in your body. You've learned it like a song, and
yeah.
that's a really yeah, that's a sort of really nice universal piece.
I mean,
Uh,
also myself, because I studied drums for quite a while.
mm.
I find myself always that I'm always following rhythm. So it's like quite often at shows, I'll find myself doing air drumming, kind of like like there's some kids that like in the rock shows they'll be doing like air guitar sort of thing. I'll always be following like rhythm. And one of the things which always fascinated me, which was like if I was ever running a project, would be to like give kids a whole load of like dictaphones and a drumstick, and just take them out to the street and see how many noises they can find,
Mm.
and
Mm.
see if they get them to compose a piece like kind of out, out of what sounds that they find.
Well, it's like you were saying about earlier about doing a walk, that there's so many interesting sounds and
Yeah,
places, out and about, just, the sounds of traffic or the sounds of car horns or the sounds of machinery can all actually be very musical.
yeah, really. So like I found, like sometimes if I was also walking back from gigs, if I had a drumstick, I would literally be like spend at least an hour like playing all the railings as I'd be walking back.
That's great.
Because I basically just like I get stuck into like making up my own songs. So like sometimes people would like kind of sometimes look at me slightly strangely because like I'll be like kind of playing the railings, but also like kind of in my own head I'd be making up like the absolute perfect song. So I visualize how it looked and how it sounded
That sounds great.
without actually knowing how to necessarily write the melody sort of thing.
Hmm.
I just
That
think
sounds very creative. I think it sounds great.
yeah, well, I've always been like quite a creative person.
Hmm.
Because obviously you saw me drawing you at your show at the Trinity
Yeah, that's right. Great drawing.
to here actually.
Oh,
It's in one of these multi-millions of books. So I've got literally like loads of these. So I've only been doing it for the past like 2 or 3 years.
right.
I believe you're in here somewhere. I'll find you in a second. But yeah, basically I started doing that because I've been with various art groups sort of thing.
Hmm.
I decided right one day that I thought I would challenge myself, so I was taking part in a drawing group where we'd go around various different churches and we would like kind of be drawing stuff, and I'd be quite often be drawing statues because they looked the most actually humane.
Mm.
I can actually emotionally, so I find it difficult, when I'm drawing, I find it difficult to draw stuff which isn't emotional.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, so for instance, like, so for instance, quite a lot of my paintings which I've done, so I do quite a lot of painting
Right.
as well. Quite a lot of them they quite often feature the faces. They quite often because of like, depends on like what mood I'm in. Sometimes I can be like really kind of psychedelic-y, really kind of abstract. But the past couple of paintings I've done have been self-portraits.
Right.
But yeah, here's the picture I did of you from the Trinity.
Oh, that's right. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. I thought with some of these chats, I've literally like any chance to like get out and show some of my pictures.
They're really great, Jeff. They're brilliant.
Thank you very much. I've also got Grace in here as well, who's supporting you.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, that's really cool. She was great. She was really cool, I thought.
Yeah, because I believe that she goes out with my friend Simon Dobson.
Oh, yeah, I know Simon. Well, Simon and I were at college together.
Yeah, he's cool. He's a cool guy,
Mm.
I think. But then like, yeah, what was I gonna say? But yeah, I tend to find that like I can't do stuff without putting my heart into things.
Mm.
I mean, I've had like, to be honest, the past 5 years has definitely been like one that have definitely helped me with my confidence a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Helped because I've had some really extraordinary things happen. I mean, if I was to list all of them, I'd probably bore everyone off the planet Earth because it's been like almost like years upon years of mini achievements.
Mm. Wonderful.
And so I guess that I can't. So like, for instance, I could never like force myself to paint.
Right.
I have to be like in the mood for doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's also been like, like, so there's deciphering in between, like which shows do I go to?
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel the mood for feeling it X, Y, Z an emotion, or do I feel sometimes if I've been to like a few shows which have been really emotionally intense, I'll be right. I fancy like what I consider comfort food.
Yeah.
you know, like
Do you go to a show most nights normally?
pretty much.
Wow, it's amazing.
In Bristol, we were getting. This is like how overly spoilt we were getting. Sometimes I'd be like finding myself sprinting from venue to venue.
Wow.
Yeah, right, this show's finished. Right, oh, look, someone else is still playing. Literally, can like find myself pegging half the way across the city
Hmm.
just to
Like a mini
like,
festival.
come and set or like because I found that also with a lot of gigs they provided safe spaces
Yeah.
and so like because of having those controlled environments because I struggled a lot with like for instance like a lot of socializing sort of thing.
Hmm.
So be like, right, okay, here's a safe space. You know exactly, you know what time the doors are. Usually, you know what time the first act's on or the first half of the show is on,
Hmm.
sort of thing. And then because of through doing that, because of having like, I guess it's having like spaces which had a central focus.
Yeah. An activity, isn't there? There's a thing that everybody's there for.
It's a bit like kind of going to theatre. It's the same thing. You know that you're all there for the same thing. You know that when it starts, that people will kind of hush and listen, or
Yeah.
they'll interact with something in a certain way.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of different to just going to the pub or something. There's a communal sense of what intention, isn't there?
I think that's the thing. So I find pubs quite intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I think that I think partly it's because of sometimes it's like I guess any busy place can look kind of quite intimidating to people. To be honest with you,
Hmm.
I think it's just once you, but it's like I guess it's like once you face that fourth wall sort of thing
Mm.
and breaking through it sort of thing,
Hmm. Hmm.
which I think also comes with challenging yourself. Maybe
Yeah.
I mean, is there any form of composition that you found yourself um, actually finding maybe too challenging?
Um, I did a big piece. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Five Telegrams, a big classical piece that I
Mm,
did a couple of years ago, and that was very daunting. I mean, it was a lot of pressure.
yeah.
I had to open the proms and I had to open the Edinburgh Festival, and it was going to be on
Wow.
TV, and big deal. And but it had to also reflect the First World War, the end of the First World War, the centenary, and I felt very scared about trying to write, because it's such a difficult subject, and I felt like I didn't know much about it, and for a long time I was thinking that the pressure was too much, that to open these big festivals that thousands and thousands of people were going to, and also the investment of other people's time, the kind of guilt of other people spending money and time was getting quite.
I guess also knowing how to convey the emotions as well.
Exactly, exactly, and how to be respectful of something that is very emotive, and how to, for me, it's about trying to find a way in to the process that feels genuine so that I can then write in a emotive way. So I needed to find an angle into the subject matter that felt real to me rather than trying to just be vague
Yeah, like
around the subject.
so it's like kind of I guess finding a way to ease yourself into it without like kind of necessarily going here's what it is.
Exactly,
Like
especially something like the First World War is huge,
yeah,
huge, and problematic and awful, and it's too big to try and summarize quickly. So it took a long time to research and figure out what I was going to do for that piece.
I think that could be said for a lot of wars actually. For a lot of if you're doing like taking something with such a heavy subject,
Mm.
you know, so it is like then it's going to take quite a lot of time to process and I guess find your way into it sort of thing.
Hmm.
I think it's also about I guess finding the time, like giving in a way which is like where you're not like kind of too hectically pressured.
Yeah, yeah. I think especially if you want to write something that is, that has that kind of connection. I think you're right. You do need to. The thing that's important for me is the genuineness. I don't want to have an artificial sense of emotion. It has to be a genuine connection. So to make that genuine, you have to find your connection with it, and that might be that, you know, maybe starting material doesn't resonate with you, so it's about taking the time to find something that feels right for you.
Yeah, I think that's what kind of like defines for me genuine artists,
Mm,
is that, you know, like the emotion that they're feeling will also be 100% genuine too.
mm,
I think that it's also what makes, for me, music quite inspiring,
mm,
is the way that it can be allow people to be genuinely emotional.
mm.
I think that yeah, I'm not sure quite what I'm getting at, but
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's one of the it's you know, we can't put our fingers on why it can be emotional, but it absolutely can be. It can completely change, you know, an atmosphere internally, how, you know, how we're feeling, or communally. You know, it's an amazingly powerful thing.
definitely. I mean, it's also like, I know that there's certain tones within sound. Whenever I hear them, I can like it does make you feel something.
Mm,
So like sometimes there'll be certain notes which I hear which will literally break the hairs on my neck up, sort of thing, or they'll be like kind of, you know, like sort of, I think that it makes us realize that we're probably more sensitive than we realize,
mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and also like how um yeah, and just it's as I said, like different sound frequencies also cause us to react in a different way as well.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because like sometimes you can get like obviously the very high end frequencies which especially with played with certain intensity can either make people kind of feel a deep sense of unease,
Mm.
or like kind of um make people like almost dive for cover, or there's the kind of like, well, there's the more bass end frequencies which can have sometimes the completely opposite sort of thing and like completely hypnotize people.
Mm. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. That there's, you know, and obviously there's sound is used to move people on, you know, to make people physically uncomfortable. You know, it's used as torture device, and you know, it's hugely has a huge impact on our bodies, doesn't it?
Yeah, massively. Well, hence the term Bram noting. I actually didn't really actually experience that once, unfortunately.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was at a Donus Virginia show at the Fiddlers. And I literally, like, I think halfway through their last song on their encore, because where I was, and the height of the stage, I had the bass player's bass kept on, like, pounding me in the stomach. So I had to literally sprint halfway through the last song, sprint past everyone, to literally sprint to the toilet.
You should sue them.
I'm like, no, they're one of my kind of favourite bands, admittedly.
Oh,
They're just
great.
like I'm a bit of a sucker for my nerd rock, as I call them. So I think that's the kind of music which I almost call my comfort food,
Right.
because I know that they'll be in the venue, they'll be fist pumping, and they'll be kind of like head banging, jumping up and down, singing back some of the songs.
That's great.
Whereas something like going back to like bands who play on the hypnotic side of things, like a band like Sun, who like play kind of like, I describe it as like drone black metal.
Right.
I mean, like one of the few times I wore earplugs last year was to go and see Sun and Anna von Holzwolf in Bristol in
Right.
Legs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's partly because like Sun played through named after their amplifiers, because
Did they what? Sorry.
they're named after their amplifiers.
Oh, right.
So it's like Sun, but then they've got the amplification symbol.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Basically, they played through about 13 stacks. You know, and that's like the slightly stripped down version.
Wow.
So like but then their whole thing is about like creating an atmospheric where it's kind of like kind of almost like a spiritual sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it as almost like as if like a spiritual release. And they also they spend most of the entire show, pretty much the entire stage is completely caped in dry ice.
Wow.
So you very rarely see them,
Hmm.
and they're always there and like kind of wearing black robes because everything on stage is black apart from the dry ice.
Wow, sounds very atmospheric.
Yeah, and but it's that sort of thing where I've been to like one or two of their shows where I've been like maybe like really stressed out, but then like sometimes they start playing and it just relaxes.
Mm.
It's like how like I guess it's like the reason why people do things like gong baths.
Yeah.
You know, it's because of like it almost acts as a form of meditation.
Hmm.
I mean, because you do see people like I mean like their sets are a full 2 hours long, sort of thing, and they'll probably play about 3 or 4 chords.
Wow.
Most of it's all drone,
Yeah.
but it's like about how yeah, I guess that's looking at how like kind of sound waves can act as like a kind of bath and almost like
Mm.
as if you feel like your entire body being washed.
It's this kind of deep. It's minimalism, isn't it? It's this and there's this whole movement of deep minimalism, which is this music, like you say, that lasts for hours, has very little material, and it forces you to listen differently because you
Mm,
can't expect there to be any change of. Oh, I've just looked at the time, so I might have to go in about a few minutes, Jeff. I've just suddenly spotted that I've got to speak to my sister at 2.
oh wow,
um yeah, let me send her a quick text and check she's still.
yeah, no worries,
um,
no worries at all. But yeah, no, it's yeah, I do think about that sort of thing quite a lot actually.
mhm.
How like music affects like my environment and about like how I mean I've always used like sort of things for like maybe it's like exploration thing, some of those feelings which are too difficult to really explain to people.
Mm. Well, it's that intangible thing, isn't it? That experience, and sometimes it can be very frustrating when we are convinced that a piece of music is powerful or uplifting and one of our friends isn't into it. It can be incredibly frustrating because you can feel yourself such clarity, but it's subjective. Nobody can, someone else might just be like, oh no, it's no good, and you're trying to, there's nothing tangible to discuss about it.
I think that's the thing is that I find for me is that I mean music's deeply personal. So like for instance, I'd surprise people by some people which I do like, and then some people which I don't like.
Mm.
I've always found myself, not really following necessarily all the crowds sort of thing,
Hmm.
and going like, right, I like this because of like nobody knows this.
But a lot of people look to you for your taste, right? I mean, you've got
Yeah,
very a lot of people are very, people
yes,
I've spoken to very respect your
yeah.
taste, which is great.
I'm very lucky to have that. To be honest,
Mm.
I've been very lucky. Like when I think about most of my life and actually how well supported I have been,
Mm.
because I've had parents who've effectively have allowed me to live the life which I've wanted to live to a certain extent. I mean, they'll still happily stick the pincushion in the ego whenever it needs deflating.
Right.
Oh, trust me. But then that's what I think every good parent should do, or like
Mm.
be encouraging of people to explore like their possibilities, but also like be there as like a kind of like support mechanism.
Absolutely.
I think that's also the value of also finding like obviously like there's like your blood family, but then also like your friendships sort of thing.
Absolutely.
I
And the
think it's
community that, and when probably if you're going to so many gigs, you must see people at the shows, lots, everybody, I could tell from our, how many people knew you and were happy to see you. And,
yeah.
it's that's a lovely feeling.
No, it's really it is. I do think about that. Go actually, yeah. Sometimes I do take that for granted, and I guess
Mm.
that's partly through you know when I'm there at the time, I may not always be aware of actually how special something is.
Mm.
I mean, like I had like one of the venues have like literally made their hand stamp about me. So like it was like the Louisiana, which was like it's like small 140 capacity
Yeah.
room. It's a really good little venue. They got a local artist to design their hand stamp.
the hand stamp, right?
Yeah, so literally like so when you kind of go in, you have like the hand stamp, which is like a picture, like like kind of left field painting of my hair,
Huh?
Big Jeff approved.
Wow, that is an honor. That's
That's,
amazing.
but I do feel like because I've been given opportunities which other people haven't been given, and I think that's this time I've been reflecting on that a lot more really.
But it's so lovely to speak to someone who really connects with the music. You know, I do a lot of interviews and speak to
Yeah,
people who are more interested in the journalism, or and you're not necessarily sensing that the starting point is a love of music, and
yeah.
it's a different thing. You know, when it's great that
They
you really
expect
love
me
music.
to fully bring everything, so it's like here's like the fully prepared dossier. Here's what we're talking about, the sort of thing, and it's been like no. Whereas with doing these, I think that I could never really be like that because I'm not very professional. Like, I think that'd be too slick a professional. Whereas like I think that I mean I remember like a few years ago, the very first time I ever semi tried to interview someone was actually Ezra Furman at festival one year at
Mm,
a festival on the Isle of Wight.
right.
That was partly because him and his tour manager said, "Hey, do you want to interview Ezra Furman?" I was like, "Okay." Um, and the very first thing which I asked him about was about does he consider himself to be an outsider artist, or how does it feel to be considered like an? So he kind of is.
Mm,
Like, nerdy guy. He makes kind of rock and roll music, but he's definitely I could definitely pick up like like autism spectrum
right.
like straight away. I was like watching him, going like, "Yep, he's definitely on the autistic spectrum."
Right.
And I think that kind of it was good, but it also slightly threw him as well.
Mm.
I think that he's these like is a prepared interviews sort of things. So for him to all of a sudden be face to face with me, he's definitely not um like anywhere near professional.
It
My
was probably very refreshing for him. I bet he really enjoyed. You know, you get so used to just trotting out the same stuff that I bet that was very. I bet he found that probably quite impactful.
Yeah, probably. I think he did actually,
Mm.
because like I asked him about it when he played in Bristol last year, and yeah, I think he's someone which I'm probably going to try and get on my list of people to try and have chats with. Because the whole idea of doing this series is just like talking to people from different backgrounds and different experiences, and then like I guess it's like kind of they're all people which I've got to agree to talking to firstly. So that's the reason my approach to you is because I really like what you do and I really admire your art and the value that it gives people.
Hmm.
I think it's like that is like the number one main reason really.
Lovely. That's great. I think well, that's like the best possible reason, isn't it, to be communicating for that reason rather than because it's cool or fashionable or
Yeah,
anything else like that.
but it's also brilliant of like giving me like a chance to sit down with you because of like obviously at like somewhere like the Trinity gig, I find that it can be a bit rushed after shows.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes when you haven't had the time to really, so I describe it as like having like a really filling meal, and so you're still like digesting it all.
Yeah.
And so because of like, I guess that having like meaningful communication with people is actually helping breaking down the barriers as to like how to reach out really.
Absolutely, and it can feel at the moment, especially, can't it, that we're all just in our own little bubbles, and that communication that might normally happen through performing is taken. So, absolutely, speaking to people is hugely important.
Yeah, and also that, and I found it's helped with doing video calls because I still find like phoning people really intimidating.
Mm,
I think it's partly because you can hear people's voices, but you can't read their faces.
yeah,
And I think that there's so much like I've probably said this to like to other people in the chats where there's so much like language is created via expression. So so this is like the next best thing to actually sitting down and speaking face to face.
well, I hope we can do that one day as well. That'd be really nice.
And that'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
I
Um,
mean, I too do dream of like sometimes having live shows returning, but
I think it will happen. Well, not soon, but I don't believe it's gone forever. Do you?
no, I think there'll be ways around it. I mean, because I think what would be really interesting would be to see, people playing around with technology like virtual reality or via, like maybe having ways which we could find still making the gigs interactive,
Mm.
but like so like we've seen like I think it would be our thing, but also like one of the ideas which I came up with when I was talking to my friend Kate Stables the other week would be like getting a load of artist easels and getting people to actually draw the show or like paint the show,
Mm.
not to like um, visualize how they feel about something, you know,
Mm-hmm.
visualize their emotions.
Mm.
Um, and it's like, right, you don't necessarily have to have a particular skill, but just be willing to give yourself over to it.
Yeah. See, react visually in a way that you wouldn't normally be thinking about
Yeah.
that interpretation. Yeah.
I think the thing is, though, is that actually that's, for me, where sometimes where some of the best art is made, is where you don't have the judgment. So I tend to find that, I mean, I'm definitely my own worst critic, but also like I tend to find that it's much more freeing when people that you can that you'd be amazed by actually what you can show people what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do focus quite a lot on our inabilities.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think utilizing people's strengths would be saying abilities.
Well, it's very easy to paralyze yourself with thoughts that you're not good enough at something, or I know plenty of people who've written music that they've never played anybody, even a friend, because they keep saying it's not finished or they're not good
Mm,
enough, and at some point it's just good just to take the plunge and give things a go, right?
yeah, that's that's exactly my attitude.
Mm.
That's what's become my attitude anyway.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm so sorry, Jeff. My sister, I haven't managed to push her back a bit longer. She's just got her baby, so I
Uh,
said I'd give you a
uh,
quick call. Um,
that's pretty fair enough, Mary. Anna. It's been really lovely to chat to you.
yeah, you too. Thank you so much for getting in touch, Jeff. It's really nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Um, well, hopefully see you another time soon, and it'd be lovely to meet up for a chat
Yeah,
sometime.
man. I hope so too.
Yeah, at a gig one day before too long, if not that before.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, I'm hoping it's not before too long.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm hoping it's not before too long before I can end up going back into the fields again
yeah, yeah,
and
definitely.
experiencing music in all environments.
Absolutely. Well, keep safe and busy in the meantime, definitely.
Yeah, will do. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.